Welcome to Superhumanize. I'm your host, Ariana Summer. Today's episode is a truth-telling, taboo-breaking, and pleasure-restoring conversation that could quite literally change lives. I'm joined by Dr. Laurie Mintz, psychologist, author, speaker, and Emeritus Professor at the University of Florida, whose life's work has been a powerful act of cultural unlearning and sexual awakening. Dr. Mintz is the author of the groundbreaking books, Becoming Cliterate, Why Orgasm Equality Matters and How to Get It, and A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex. Both are rooted in science, filled with heart, and have been proven through published research to increase sexual satisfaction, body confidence, and orgasm frequency in women, and to radically improve communication and connection between partners. For too long, the narratives around women's bodies and sexuality have been distorted by shame, silence, and a patriarchal script that left so many disconnected from their birthright, pleasure, autonomy, and full aliveness. In a world where we have been taught that sex is penetration, that female pleasure is elusive, and that clitoral stimulation is optional, Dr. Mintz is leading a revolution for orgasm equality, for linguistic liberation, and for true intimacy based on knowledge, consent, and joy. Her viral TEDx talk, watched by over 2 million people, challenges us to close the pleasure gap and to stop treating women's orgasms as afterthoughts or, worse, illusions. And her message is as much about cultural healing as it is about personal empowerment. In this episode, we explore why sex education fails most women, how language shapes our sexual experiences, why so many women fake orgasm, and how we can all return to a more authentic, attuned, and pleasure-centered approach to sexuality. This is much more than a conversation about sex. It is a conversation about power, equality, and embodiment. It is about reclaiming what was ours all along, and to remember that when a woman's pleasure is honored, we do not just heal individuals, we begin to heal the world.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.
Laurie, welcome to the Superhumanize podcast. I am so pleased I get to pick your brilliant brain today.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I have been thinking so much about women and how we have basically been received or not received in so many areas of life. And your work, your offerings focus on one of the most important aspects of being a woman, and that is pleasure. And I would love for you to start this conversation, Laurie. Can you share with us what originally drew you to focus your work on female pleasure and the orgasm gap?
Absolutely. So the story started before the orgasm gap. My initial focus was, my first book was on women having diminished desire. And that was because I was hearing from every friend, every client, I'm never horny anymore. What's going on? So that was my first focus. And I wrote A Tired Woman's Guide to Passionate Sex. And to make a long story short, that kind of opened the door for me to do a lot of other things in the sexual arena, including teach a very large scale enrollment human sexuality class at the University of Florida. And I was shocked and surprised when I learned that a whole generation of knowledge was like gone. I'm 65, so, my coming of age, if you will, was right after the sexual revolution, etc. We all knew about our clitorises. We were empowered sexually. These young women, they didn't even know the word. And they were in so much pain. I had so many students tell me they were like, it was this aha moment for them when I told them, no, most women don't orgasm from penetration. No, you're not broken. And they were so blown away by it that I really revamped the course and started really just teaching to women's pleasure. And I got so much positive feedback from my students that I thought it can't just be these students at the University of Florida who need this information. This is a cultural problem. And that's when I wrote Becoming Cliterate, to expose the orgasm gap and to help women close it in their own bedrooms.
And which is such important work. And just recently, we also come to find out that the clitoris is not just this tiny bundle of nerves, but it's actually really large and pretty much all encompassing. And what really boggles the mind, if you think about it, is why do you think our culture still often clings so tightly to the myth that sex equals penetration?
In a word, the over patriarchy. Like, this is the most, it's not the only form of patriarchy, but it's so insidious.
Yes.
It is such an insidious form of patriarchy. We define sex as a penis going in a vagina. We use the word simultaneously, right? And that is not the way women orgasm. We use the word foreplay just to lead up to the main event, when that is the main event for women. We call our entire genitals a vagina. We call our genitals by the part that's more useful to men sexually than to ourselves. And all of this goes, and I'm not blaming individual men, I am blaming culture. We have a systemic overvaluing of male sexual pleasure and a systemic devaluing of female pleasure.
Yes, Laurie. And this does not only hurt women, and this does not only diminish the incredible vastness of a woman's energy, but it does the same to men. When sex gets myopically focused on just some particular things, and when people engaging in something that's supposed to bring absolute pleasure and bliss do not get to experience that, it robs us from one of the most beautiful experience human beings can have. And that's not just a physical experience. And before we go deeper into this and also into how women actually orgasm, I'd love for you to also give us your perspective on how language and mainstream media have distorted our understanding of women's bodies and pleasure.
Absolutely. Let me start with mainstream media. In mainstream movies, let's not even talk about porn here. Let's just talk about mainstream movies. What is a little bit of fooling around and then an intercourse scene where the woman and the man are orgasming at the same time, where the woman is having an incredible orgasm from thrusting. And so if women see these images and they don't have scientifically accurate sex ed, they think this is what sex is. And then they have the experience and they're like, that didn't give me pleasure, or that gave me pain. And that's a huge issue, because if you're not aroused enough before penetration, you're going to have pain. And women are feeling broken. What's wrong with me? I can't do this the way the movies do. And the language reflects and perpetuates this. Again, sex and intercourse as if they're the same thing. Foreplay, just what comes before it. And it reminds me, I interviewed somebody, a reporter interviewed me one time about a sex scene that everybody was talking about. And she was like, don't you think it's hot? And I was like, no, I think it's unrealistic. The woman has this orgasm instantly from penetration. And she said, well, you have to understand there were only like 5 seconds to film that scene. And I said, that doesn't convince me. There's a lot you can film in 5 seconds. You could film his head going under the covers and her having an orgasm in 5 seconds. But we don't see that.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing, what women then learn, especially when they feel like, oh, what's wrong with me? Something is broken. I am broken. They learn to mask that by performing, because so many women feel like, okay, I don't want to come across as if I'm broken, or because so many of us have been raised to be people pleasers or men pleasers. I myself am a recovering people pleaser, so we don't want to hurt his feelings or make him feel inadequate. And most of us have not been given the tools to actually talk about sex, passion, desire, eros, and to really connect with our partner in that way. And I'm curious, Laurie, did you have your own aha moment, either personally or professionally, where you realized that this is not only misinformation, this is systemic erasure?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I started writing Becoming Cliterate, I knew there was a big problem, right, from my students. I knew we had the orgasm gap. But the deeper I got into the literature, the more I was just like amazed and appalled at, even in medicine, even the doctors aren't taught about the clitoris in med school, even gynecologists. And it's just, it is a systemic erasure of women's most reliable route to orgasm. And we use the word vagina, but the vagina is not equivalent to the penis. The clitoris is the organ that's the same as the penis. And we have systemically and medically and culturally erased women's most erotic organ from the cultural consciousness.
And Laurie, this ties right into another question I wanted to ask you. You described the clitoris as the only organ in the human body that's solely designed for pleasure. Why has that truth been so taboo?
I think people are maybe afraid of women's capacity for pleasure. If we really embraced our pleasure, we're very powerful beings. If we really say, this is something for me. And you talked a minute ago about performance. I was reading an article earlier that was even I have aha moments all the time, and I wrote this book. I was reading about a woman who someone asked her, are you a giver or a receiver in bed? And she said, I'm a receiver. And the woman said, are you really receiving or are you performing for your male partner? It was like, even women, when they're receiving pleasure, a lot of times they're performing that pleasure.
Yes. And I have not a single woman friend in my life who has not, at some time or the other, faked an orgasm. And even if it was what women tend to call benign motives in order to not make their partner feel inadequate. But I think it is so damaging not only to women, but also to the relationships and to their partners. And Laura, you have said we do not need to fix women's orgasms. We need to fix the system. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, women aren't broken. When women are alone, 95% orgasm within minutes.
Yeah.
We know how to please ourselves. When women are with other women, they have more orgasms than when we're with men. Though the statistics, one I love, it's not in Becoming Cliterate because it came out after, is there was a study of bisexual women. So they hooked up with women and men. And when their first time hookup partner was a woman, they orgasmed 64% of the time. When with a man, 7% of the time. So our bodies aren't broken. The way we do heterosexual sex is broken.
Yes, indeed, Laurie. And you know something, I love men. I have a lot of really great male friends. And when we really connect with regard to the topic of pleasure and also men's desire to really get the full experience, so many of them share that they never got the tools. There's porn, there's Playboy, all that kind of stuff, but it is just such a small facet of what sex really is, yet it gets sold as the whole. So no wonder most men do not have mentors, either women or men, who share with them what this is all about. And I have told my male friends, look, what you want to do if you don't have a female friend or a partner who will really be honest with you and flow with you and share with you from her depths with regard to this topic, what you want to do is you want to read romance novels, or you want to listen to some of these phenomenal erotic audio apps like Quinn and Dipsy, women written or women founded businesses. You're basically getting a manual. So
Yeah.
research. And I think it's phenomenal because I watch this online, and whether it's Goodreads or whether it's on Amazon or whether it's on social media groups where tens of thousands of women in each group are exchanging freely about their passion and their desires. If you want to learn about a woman's pleasure and you want to get a script, do the research. It's quite enjoyable. But these tools aside, and I'm so glad we have them, at least in countries like the US, where this doesn't get censored, there's countries where it would literally be a death sentence to even own a book like that. How is the orgasm gap a direct reflection of patriarchal conditioning?
Because the number one reason for the orgasm gap is that women are not getting the clitoral stimulation they need. So why aren't women getting the clitoral stimulation they need? Because our culture doesn't teach about the clitoris. It ignores it. It erases it. It's not in sex ed. It's not in mainstream movies. So our pleasure is erased. Think about it in reverse. What if every mainstream movie showed a man giving a woman oral sex and he orgasmed from giving oral sex? That's what the situation we have now in reverse. Yes, there are some women who orgasm from penetration, but and there's nothing wrong with those women. People ask me, they say, like, you're ignoring those women. And I say, no, I'm not, because I'm a sex therapist. I've been one for 30 years. No woman has ever come to my office and said, Dr. Laurie, what's wrong with me? I need clitoral stimulation to orgasm. But I have so many women come to me, what's wrong with me? I can't orgasm the way it is in the movies. So the movies portray what maybe happens for 4% of women, and it leaves the rest of the women feeling broken.
I am curious, Laurie. So, speaking from personal experience, so I have experienced, if we want to put it to one kind of a location, even though everything's
interconnected.
Yes, everything's interconnected. So, I have experienced oral orgasm, cervical orgasm, vaginal, or maybe this area. It's not a spot; it's more of an area. That's spot orgasm, anal orgasm. Have not experienced nipple orgasm yet, but I've had friends who have shared, yes, I've had a nipple orgasm. I've experienced an energetic orgasm, which was pretty phenomenal. But I've also recently learned that with regard to the vulva, that everything is actually interconnected with the clitoris, which is way larger than just, let's call it the little nub we see outside. So from your experience, do you think that what we call G-spot orgasm or cervical orgasm, that's actually also a clitoral orgasm?
Yeah, the G-spot, the actual name for it is the clitoral urethral vaginal complex, because it has clitoral tissue, urethral tissue, vaginal tissue. A lot of scientists say that no matter where the stimulation occurs, all orgasms are from the clitoris. So you might stimulate the vagina, but the clitoris still gets an erection because it's touching it, etc. This may be too personal, so feel free to edit this out.
No, nothing is personal.
Okay, very few women experience cervical orgasms, so that's because that's often a source of pain for most women. So I'm curious about that, if you wouldn't mind telling me about it.
Yeah. Gosh, it's to put it in words is actually pretty hard, but it is the cervix. I very well know where it's located and how it feels. And it feels very similar to a clitoral orgasm in the way that there's this buildup and this particular space gets more sensitive and more sensitive, and more energy flows through. And the climax is, for me, I can only speak from my personal experience, even more intense than an orgasm where I feel it is located more in, or comes directly from the little bud. So maybe it is a more, I don't know how it's tied into the clitoris as a whole, but, and it's not something that I've often experienced, but I have experienced it. And it was quite a revelation when it first happened many years ago, because I wasn't quite sure that was even possible. I had heard conversations about it. And there's a fine line between the pleasure and pain.
Absolutely.
You need to be with a partner who's really so in sync with you and knows you so well and knows exactly how to create this union with your body, and where it's not just the stroke in, stroke out, stroke in, stroke out, whatever has been seen on porn. So it takes somebody who's very much.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that, because I've had many women say, I hear this is possible, but it's painful for me. So I was curious. It's a rare, what Betty Dodson used to say is an orgasm, meaning we shouldn't even be talking about clitoral, vaginal, G-spot. All orgasms are the same. They are, the erectile tissue gets filled with blood, and it's released with rhythmic contractions of the pelvic floor. So no matter where the stimulation is from, it's all the same biology in terms of what an orgasm is.
Yes.
And it's the same as men's orgasms, that it's the buildup of blood in the erectile tissue and the release of that through rhythmic contractions of the pelvic floor.
Yes, on a physical level, yes, Laurie. And I feel from my own experience that when I, as a woman, am completely comfortable with fully expressing myself, when I'm out of the performative, or am I taking too long, or am I doing this right? But when I feel so free and so centered in myself and so fully self-expressed, that then the physical connects with something energetical as well.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Those have actually been some of the most beautiful and powerful orgasms, because they truly fused. There was this flow of my physical being, my spiritual being, my emotional being, my energetic being. And that, from what I have also heard from other women friends, it's most women who have experienced that, it really necessitates this absolute sense of, I can express myself fully. I am seen fully. I'm held fully. I am met fully.
That's beautiful. Yes, it's a sense, I'm oversimplifying it, but it's a sense of so much safety that you can go so deep inside yourself and your own experience and really experience what is not just a physical, but an emotional and a spiritual experience.
And safety, not merely as in, this is a safe place, my partner is a safe person, he won't do anything bad for me, but safety in the sense of that my partner is able to hold all of me and will not flinch no matter what comes out. He will not be afraid. He will not be emasculated. He will, if it's a man. Can you tell us, Laurie, in what ways, from your perspective, have women been trained, whether explicitly or implicitly, to prioritize male pleasure over their own?
Explicitly. It's explicit. The male orgasm, think about the cultural narrative about how sex goes, which is false, but a little bit of fooling around, penetration, male orgasm, sex over. The way that sex is portrayed is the male orgasm is the pinnacle of sex and it signals the end of sex.
Yeah.
If that's what we're trained to do, of course we're going to be focused on pleasing men. And I have this little thought experiment I do with some clients or students. I say, imagine you're with a male partner and he has an orgasm and you don't. How do you feel? Most women would say, okay, a little disappointed, but no big deal. Almost like it's to be expected.
Right.
And then I say, now I want you to imagine you're with a male partner and you orgasm and he doesn't. How do you feel? And 9 out of 10 women will say, what did I do wrong?
Yeah.
Because this deeply insidious belief that sex is defined by and revolves around the male orgasm and male pleasure.
And this is not in any way or form against male pleasure. When my partner experiences pleasure and I'm able to be the vessel for that, to unlock that, to give that, it's amazing. It is so beautiful. But if it is one-sided and your partner and yourself are still trapped in this box where it all centers around the male pleasure, then that is simply so sad.
It
And
is.
gosh, and I know from male friends who, after many years where they thought, oh, this is sex and oh, it's fun and pleasurable and great. And then they, at some point, either with a long-term partner and all of a sudden something changed, they may have educated themselves more, or with a new partner, they actually experience a woman and her having so much pleasure, not merely a physical orgasm, but wow. And it is transformative for the men as well. You know, it's
Yes.
like before they've tasted I don't know, some kind of like a gas station hostess cake and thought this is dessert. Then all of a sudden they get like a Michelin star explosion on their tongues, not pun intended. And again, not only a woman loses, but men lose out so much.
Absolutely. And men are suffering too, because if they believe the route to pleasuring a woman is lasting long and thrusting hard, they're not going to enjoy the part that is going to be orgasmic for them, because they're worried about, am I going to last long enough for my partner? And that's going to diminish their joy.
Yes.
And it's such a sad irony. Men worry about being big enough and lasting long enough. And a lot of women worry about a male partner being too big and going on too long. It's so sad, the disconnect that we have.
And let's talk about the emotional and relational cost of this imbalance. So not just for women, but for men and couples.
Yeah, absolutely. You're missing out on true shared pleasure, and you're missing out on true intimacy. If you're not talking about it, if you're performing for each other, you're really missing out on should be a beautiful shared experience. And we know that, let's talk about lesbian women for a minute, or women who get it on with women, no matter how they identify. We know that they have more orgasms than women who get it on with men. And there's research-based reasons. But none of these have to do with the woman having a clitoris. They have to do about the way sex is done. There is more clitoral stimulation. There's more time taken pleasuring each other. There's more communication. There is more attitudes of orgasm centrality, meaning my orgasm is as central as my partner's orgasm. And there's more vibrator use. It doesn't have an end that's defined. It just ends when both people decide it's over. And if you can apply those same principles to heterosexual sex. It's not about the two people having the same parts. It's about the behaviors and the attitudes that they bring to the encounter.
Yes, and let's talk about this clitoracy. What does it mean to be cliterate, and how do we begin?
To be cliterate means to have the conversations we're having now. It means to be aware of women's pleasure. It means to respect women's pleasure, embrace women's pleasure, not think that it's the same as male pleasure. And this whole idea of the simultaneous orgasm is really very non-cliterate, if you will, right? Because you're expecting both people to orgasm at the same act during the same time, rather than saying what you just said, you love when your partner experiences pleasure. Your partner loves when you experience pleasure. Lesbian women take turns so they can experience each other's pleasure rather than expecting both receive pleasure at the exact same time. So to be cliterate is to understand it doesn't only mean stimulating the clitoris, because you've just said there's other ways to orgasm, but it means embracing and understanding women's vast capacity for pleasure besides penis in the vagina.
Right. Yes. And Laurie, your research shows that both women and men benefit from reading your book, Becoming Cliterate. What changes do you see when men become part of this awakening?
Yeah, and that was something that I was so pleased about, that there was a study of men who read it and a study of women who read it. And what changes did they make? And the men became better sexual communicators. They had a greater understanding of women's genital anatomy and routes to pleasure. And they also gave up damaging myths that were holding them back about their own sexuality, like the bigger the better, the longer I last, the better. Women became more orgasmic. They had better body image. They felt more entitled to pleasure. They became better sexual communicators. They had more arousal, more satisfaction. And here's the kicker that was like, what? The biggest effect that women had was a decrease in sexual pain. Do you know I do not mention the word pain in the book?
Huh.
But what women were starting to, why do women have pain? There are medical reasons. Don't get me wrong. There are somebody with sexual pain, there can be many medical reasons. But for many young women, one of the biggest causes of pain is having penetration before being aroused. And so the book really focused on arousal and how to get aroused and what turns you on. And I think there's even a line in there, just because he's hard and ready doesn't mean it's time to let him in. So they had less sexual pain as well, which blew my mind, because I didn't write the book about pain. I wrote the book about orgasms.
That's fascinating, Laurie. And with that in mind, can you share some practical and empowering steps women can take today to reclaim their pleasure and their voice?
Absolutely. So the first thing I would say is educating yourself. Learn your own genital anatomy. Most women haven't even looked at themselves.
Right.
So read my book, read another book, take a mirror, look at yourself, find out what you have. Okay. So that's the first step. Then the second step is learning to be, and these don't necessarily have to come in this order, but learning to be mindful, learning to be physically present in one's own body, because you can't have an orgasm if you're holding your stomach in, if you're wondering if you look fat, all of that, right? You can't do that. So you need to learn embodiment and mindfulness. And then you need to learn sexual communication, how to tell a partner what you want. And then there's some scientifically supported tools like vibrators. Vibrators are empirically supported techniques for women to orgasm because we have special receptors on our vulva for vibration, and using lubricant because not everybody gets wet. You can feel aroused in your head and not wet. So I've come up with a little rhyme about this, which is educate, which is like about your vulva. Educate, lubricate, vibrate, communicate, alternate. And by alternating, I mean taking turns, giving and receiving pleasure. And if women would follow that and meditate. Okay, so educate, meditate, communicate, lubricate, vibrate, alternate.
I
If
love
women would follow those steps, we would close the orgasm gap.
Yes. Beautiful, Laurie. And I have a couple of questions. So, with regard to vibrators, I'm a big fan of them. That being said, I have some friends, women in the health and wellness community, where there's often said, oh, don't use vibrators, they desensitize you, this and that. Now, I personally have not experienced any desensitization. Hope I said that correctly. But I also don't want to respect others' opinions or experiences, but from your base of knowledge.
Yeah, so it's not about people's experiences, it's about science for me. And here's what the science says. And I'm not diminishing someone's experience, but what I would ask them is, what do you mean by desensitization? When you ask that question, what you often hear is, I will always need a vibrator. Not that they're. And so my answer to that is, so what? We don't tell men if you always need intercourse or a blowjob, forget it. You don't do that. It's only when it comes to vibrators. But what the research by people who have studied women's genitals, what the research shows is that vibration, we accustomate or get accustomed, I should say, to any type of simulation. That happens with fingers. It happens, whatever you started doing, often that's the best. You get used to that. But the vibrator itself is not going to change your genitals. And in fact, we have something on our genitals called Krauss corpuscles. They're special corpuscles, bundles of nerves that respond to vibration. We have them on our fingertips. If you take a vibrator to your fingertip, you'll feel it. Take it to right here. You're very tired. I'm sorry. I can't even find the word for forehead. Your forehead, you won't really feel it. You'll just get almost like you were numbed there. Take it to your genitals, you'll really feel it because there's tons of Krauss corpuscles there. So what we know from science is that women who use vibrators have easier and more intense orgasms. There was one study of 500 women who had never had an orgasm, some of them suffering from lifelong lack of orgasm. They were given a clitoral vibrator, taught to use it, and 93% became orgasmic.
Wonderful.
So no, the science does not support the harm. It supports the benefit.
Good. I love to hear that. Again, I'm a big fan of vibrators and whatever can support people to get pleasure, as long as it's consensual, is a good thing.
Exactly.
I have another question for you. And this question comes from the personal love and care for one of my dear friends. And she recently brought up that she's had children. And she recently brought up she is looking at getting, I think you call it labiaplasty, because after giving birth to her children, of course, the area changed a little bit. Her beautiful body that created life changed a little bit. And while I always support individuals making their own choices and biological freedom and this and that, I couldn't help but really, something in me really tightened up because I was just thinking, I know it's quite commonplace now, but something inside of me just cringes at the thought of taking a scalpel to one of a woman's most sensitive body parts merely for looks. Now, again, I don't want to diminish it if she's extremely self-conscious about it or whatnot, but my personal reaction was just one of, oh.
Yeah, so there are some, I'm not a doctor, but I've read enough that I will tell you what I have read. There are some women for whom the procedure is medically warranted because their labia are so long that it maybe rubs against their jeans or like it's painful.
Yeah.
But most women are getting it strictly for cosmetic reasons. And what it does is the labia, women's labia are analogous to the shaft of the penis. They're chock full of erectile tissue and sensitive nerve endings. So you are, for appearance, you are cutting off a very sensitive organ. So that I'm trying to think of, I love metaphors. So I'm trying to think of a good metaphor. So I have a large nose. You can see that. Okay. So I could have maybe gotten a nose job, but I didn't. But having a nose job, it's not a great metaphor, but a labiaplasty is like cutting off your nose because you're cutting off a part that has a function, right? Women do it because they say they're so self-conscious that it's more pleasurable when they're not. But I feel really sad for your friend because this is a woman who did a beautiful thing. She had a baby, and I'm wondering, I have to wonder out loud, like about her partner. Is he shaming her? This man who she put her body through. My daughter just had a baby, and it brought back a lot of memories. It's a lot our bodies go through. And so to be told that you no longer look okay, like, I don't know if it's coming from him or from her, but I have my antenna, my little red flags are going up big time here.
I concur with you entirely, Laurie, and I don't know either whether it's partner or culture-based, because of course porn is so pervasive, and so in many cases there's also an aesthetic that becomes normalized, even though it's an aesthetic that is highly manipulated. And it's also an aesthetic that oftentimes skews towards having genitals, particularly female genitals, look like they are pre-birth, very young, maybe even prepubescent.
Yes, exactly. The men are chosen in porn for having larger than average penises, and women are either chosen for having even and petite inner lips, or they have this surgery. So we are like, it is a topic that gets me very upset because
Yes.
we are saying this is back to that performance, because we're saying it's more important how you look than how you feel sexually.
Yes. And it gets me very upset too, because I want every woman, and especially people who are dear to me, I just want them to live fully, to experience pleasure fully, and not to potentially mutilate their pleasure and their self-expression for something that's merely aesthetic, and especially if it doesn't cripple them psychologically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would think your friend would be much better off with sex therapy than a procedure.
Yeah, I concur. And also looking at reframing a lot of the beliefs that have been put on.
And there's a site she might want to look on. It's called my book. I have a page in my book with a panel of vulvas, and I cite the site there. It's online, and I can't come up. I'm really tired today. I am sorry, but I can't come up with the name of it. But I would want her to look at that, this site online of real women's vulvas. And what Paul Joannitis, the author of The Guide to Getting It On, says is that inner lips is what give vulvas their personality. So I'll be self-disclosive here. I have one inner lip that sticks out so far, my genitals look like this.
I love it.
And it never bothered me because I didn't grow up with porn or whatever. That's my unique vulva personality, and I'm not going to cut it off.
No, heck no. And I know exactly what page you're talking about. I can't come up with a name either, but I remember looking through it in the past. I was like, wow, this is amazing. I love that this project is out there. And aside from physical experiences, you, Laurie, have worked with thousands of women in your practice and through your writing, even more. What have you learned about the deeper and often spiritual significance of women reclaiming their pleasure?
What I have found is, which I didn't expect to find, I thought I was writing a book about women's orgasms. But what I was told by countless women is that if I can assert myself, embrace my pleasure in the bedroom, I'm unstoppable outside. That it's not, we used to think, oh, get empowered on the outside and then apply it. But no, I hear from women, once I learn to embrace my pleasure in the bedroom, I have more confidence and power in all of my life.
Indeed, there is an absolutely powerful connection between sexual awakening and also personal and spiritual empowerment. And if pleasure was never meant to be shameful, what was it meant to be?
A human right.
Mm.
World Sexual Organization says that sexual pleasure is a fundamental human right. And we are systemically denying half of the population their access to full pleasure.
I agree with you. It is a fundamental human right. And we've touched upon it a little bit before when we talked about your book. How can we take the first steps to invite our partners into this journey, especially when there may have been a history, a pattern of fake orgasms or
I think it starts with the woman knowing herself
Mm.
and embracing herself and letting go of shame. And shame is a hard one, but you can get rid of it. You asked about vibrators and sensitivity. I can use an example there. So I think the best way to get rid of shame is to define it in behavioral terms. What is she ashamed of? I'm ashamed of liking a vibrator, maybe. Or let's take your friend with a labia. That's even better. I'm ashamed of what my labia look like. Then where's the source of the shame? Where did she get that? Is it porn? Is it like her husband? And then let's juxtapose her belief with actual science. And what actual science says is the labia is a very orgasmic part of women's bodies. So how does she reconcile that? And to me, it's coming up with a mantra. I love my labia for the pleasure they can give me. My labia give my vulva its personality. I think so. It starts with knowing yourself, embracing who you are, and then learning to communicate that to partners.
Indeed. And what man or any partner in their right minds would want a woman to cut off part of what gives her pleasure?
Exactly. Yes,
Oh.
exactly. There's if we can juxtapose it, it's a modern form of female genital mutilation.
Yes.
You're cutting off a part of women's bodies that give them pleasure.
Yes, and talking about female genital mutilation, their friend of mine has was made to go through this, and many years ago she opened up about this to me, and what really saddened me is that she actually also tried to justify it. I think, if I remember correctly, this is so many years ago, but that it's cleaner and this and that. She was enmeshed within that paradigm, a paradigm where also it's actually women who perpetrate this on women, on young girls, because this is the way it's always been done. This is what needs to be done. So she is considered an acceptable marriage material and so forth. And it just it broke my heart, and it still does.
I'm so sorry she went through that. So
Yeah.
painful. Yeah.
I can't even begin to imagine.
Mm.
And but to your point, yes, I agree that labiaplasty, unless there's a real need for it. If it's
A
just
medical, right, exactly.
this mutilation. In your mind, Laurie, how does true sexual equality look like in a relationship, and how can we approach it with grace and without blame?
Exactly that way. True sexual equality is embracing and respecting each person's reliable route to pleasure. What do they need? Without shame, without blame, with open communication and sharing. Yeah.
Mhm. And if every listener could remember just one thing from this conversation, what would you want that to be?
Wow. Your body is built for pleasure, and it is your human right. And I would tell them to learn about themselves and then embrace themselves and then share that with the partner. You self-awareness comes first, and then follow that with communication. And it's not simple, it's not easy, but it's well worth it.
It's so worth it.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, Laurie, I'm immensely grateful for this conversation. And before we end it, as a closing reflection, what if pleasure was never meant to be earned, but actually to be remembered? And what if orgasm was not a performance, was not meant to be perfect, but actually a frequency of truth that reconnects us to our authentic selves? And today's conversation reminds us that dismantling shame is not just personal, it's political, it's spiritual, and it is a quiet revolution that begins in the body and that ripples outward into culture, into relationship, and even governance. And when we speak honestly about what brings us joy, we undo centuries of silences, centuries of silencing. And when we center women's pleasure, we challenge systems that have long depleted us and depleted the planet. And when we embrace our bodies, not as broken or as deficient, but as wise, as worthy, and as electric, we can remember who we truly are. And I hope that it's.
I couldn't have said that better. That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. I could not agree more, and that was so beautifully said.
Thank you, Laurie. And for people who would like to connect with you, learn more about you, how can they do that?
So my name is Dr. Laurie Mintz, so DrLaurie-Mintz. That's my website, www.drlauriemintz.com. From there, you can find my Instagram, where I'm very active. That's the same handle, Dr. Laurie Mintz. My books are available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Indie Bookstore, wherever books are sold. So I would love to have listeners grab a copy of my book. It is scientifically supported self-help, which I'm excited about. And follow me on Instagram, where I really try to give kind of bite-sized feminist sex education to break down the patriarchal barriers to pleasure that we've been facing.
Wonderful, Laurie. And we'll make sure to also post all of this in the show notes. I am so grateful you made time for us and for this truly stimulating conversation. Thank you for all the incredible work that you do.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for your voice in this space, and thank you for all the wisdom you shared today. I'm very appreciative. It was a great conversation.
Thank you, Laurie. Received.
Superhumanize. Accelerated evolution.